Welcome to Wired to Hunt's Rut Fresh Radio, bringing you the latest reports from the Whitetail Woods. Presented by First Light, creating proven, versatile hunting apparel for the stand, saddle, or blind. First Light. Go farther, stay longer. And now, your hosts, KC Smith and Tyler Jones.
This is Rut Fresh Radio. I'm your host, KC Smith, and man, it is late season, but there is this thing going on where the deer is still thinking about it. The rut can still happen at any moment in time, and hunters around the country seem to think that this is their week. This is Rut Fresh. Let's go. What is happening, y'all? This is Rut Fresh Radio, brought to you by First Light Gear. I'm your host, KC Smith. Tyler Jones is also your host, and he's also here with me. We've been doing a ton of deer hunting, so it's been kind of hard to make this happen. In fact, we are recording everything the day after Christmas, which is a wild time, right? But there are still people hunting, including us.
Yeah.
In fact,
nobody else is working though in our company.
When I say us,
just you
I mean
me.
you.
Just you and me. It's the only people working after Christmas here.
Yeah, that's right, man. I think they're all just still drinking eggnog. But the Element YouTube channel is not done putting out deer hunting content.
No way.
All right, we are doing a ton of deer hunting still. I actually just got back the day before Christmas from a South Texas deer hunting adventure that was pretty sick. That'll be up pretty soon, and a lot of more stuff going on, maybe even some hog hunting pretty soon as well. We never stop hunting around here, which makes for fun times, man.
Yep.
And I'm glad that there's other people that are like this as well, because we got some pretty interesting folks to interview today. But, man, I know that, like, Christmas is a weird thing because a lot of people just either switch to waterfowl or just hang it up. I think people just push until this time of year.
Speaking of First Light, that's what they said they're doing.
Is it?
I saw a post the other day where they're just hanging up everything but waterfowl.
Going to waterfowl now?
I guess that's what they're
doing.
Was
that Garrett in that post?
I don't know who
I think it was. They had a bunch of... You got on your First Light waterfowl right now.
Yeah, just because I'm cold in my house.
Yeah.
It's fluffy, you know.
Man, that is a sick pattern right there. Are you going to do any waterfowl hunting?
I'd like to, but I think we need to ask Farmer's Almanac if it's going to keep telling us lies or not.
Farmer's Almanac, huh? Yeah. I don't look into that
every
too much.
Every time I say something about we just need some cold weather, somebody around me is like, well, Farmer's Almanac says it's supposed to be a hard winter. And I'm like, he said yesterday, it better hurry up.
Well, technically, the first day of winter was just 3 or 4 days ago.
Yeah.
Which is weird. I always think about winter starting in November. But
me too, for sure.
But I mean, we only have 2 seasons where we live.
Point is, it should have been colder than it has been.
Yeah, we were just discussing this. We had our second hard frost today, and the first one was almost 2 months ago.
Yep.
Which is wild. I know that, the further north you go in the country, the more consistent that stuff gets. But it makes for some weird deer hunting. We got cameras around the country right now, and some cameras are showing, like, bachelor groups of bucks, and some cameras are showing chasing. It's real weird.
It is weird. I know one thing about our cameras right now is that they're overall been very slow.
Man, very slow.
Like, I mean, it's talking like mostly does.
Yeah, it's sad.
Mostly nighttime. Which, I mean, not like we have a few less cameras going, so there's because batteries and stuff. But, like, I mean, I think it's just been, I don't know what it's been like everywhere else, but it's been warm here and everywhere we've hunted for the last, since that October cold front. So it's just, I know it's not the same. I know they got snow up north in some places and stuff a few weeks ago, and but
I think it's a weird thing
Southern U.S. is
to think
different.
about. But there is some strategy to some of the feeder type stuff and even food plots where everybody knows that on colder days you're going to have earlier movement. But this late in the year too, cover changes and you're going to have situations where maybe like a feeder or a food plot had cover close to it until like all the leaves fall, which that just happened here in the past week or two, pretty much. And then all of a sudden, there's not cover for a half mile to get to that spot, So, like, it's also, you have to think about that as far as daylight movement and stuff. Sure. And then human activity, which is also something we've seen. Waterfowl stuff really kind of starts to interfere with that where we live. We've seen that even on camera lately where there'll be people doing stuff that has to do with waterfowl. And then all of a sudden, nothing is there because they're feeling the heat, even though those people aren't actually interested in the deer.
You know how, like, when people talk about how when the media starts talking about stock market crash, then the stock market crashes. Like leads them into it. If they would just stop talking about it, then it would just get back into good motion. Or I wonder if like people are waterfowl hunting because people are talking about it on media.
I'm sure.
Like I wonder if that's like all of a sudden it just like somebody in media flips a switch, and all of a sudden it's like, oh man, 10,000 people saw that thing and they told their buddies they need to go hunting, and now all of a sudden there's 30,000 people thinking about duck hunting. It's crazy how that can happen, right? I mean, it's a logical, plausible thing, that could potentially happen. I don't know if it does or not, but
no, there's the aspect that you're talking about that's called a social contagion. You familiar with social contagions?
Well, I'm familiar with those two words, not together though.
So a social contagion, one of the greatest examples is the Salem witch trials.
Oh,
yeah, and so
Kaylee went to Salem. Did she? Did go
check it out
this year?
This year?
Yeah.
Oh wow!
They went during deer season.
I watched about an hour-long YouTube video about the Crucible, which is an infamous piece of literature about all that stuff, and so like there's some real negative aspects to some social contagions, but this is a little bit more lighthearted, right? Where it's like it's essentially the new word for social contagion is FOMO.
Yeah, I have it.
You got the FOMO of oh man, they're slaying the ducks. Maybe we should go out there to that hole. And it's weird.
Oh, I didn't know. I didn't think about the fact they were 1,200 miles from me, so there's actually no ducks where we're at.
I actually heard shotgun shots from my house this morning, so there's some people.
I've heard a few too.
At least sky blasting some, if not maybe getting into them. Who knows?
I've seen ducks there on the lake.
Oh, I saw a ton of divers yesterday. I mean, like literally like 200.
There's spoonies and stuff around too.
Yeah,
saw some gadwalls. There's a pond that sits by the road where by Cody's house always has gadwalls. It was pretty loaded.
I bet.
Actually,
I bet. So, well, there's a ton of grass in those places because there hasn't been very many birds eating. So it's like those things are just full of food right now.
Yeah, that's a good thought.
And this kind of goes back to the whitetail stuff that we were talking about, but there's like a weird thing going on like this time in December where we're really late in the year, and we just went through the winter solstice. So, like, the days are starting to get longer. And so, like, I'm sure when we have deer that are dependent on the daylight photo period, right? Thank you, Mark Kenyon, for the clarification, right? That they start doing different things. And one of the encouraging things to me is that we have bucks that are in bachelor groups on camera this morning, like 4 bucks on camera all together. But even up into February, we've gotten some really good rut action that we've seen. And there's a lot of different ways to explain how that happens. I think mostly it would be just not great herd dynamics for places. But if there's a little bit of, comfort in how terrible that is, it's the fact that you can get some wild things happening no matter where you live, right? Yeah. I mean, shoot, you killed a deer. You killed a deer a few years back in late December that was checking scrapes. I killed a deer 2 years ago on December 30th that checked a scrape on the way in. So, like, it's a thing, right? I was in South Texas this past week and almost killed a deer that was headed right to a scrape. I mean, he was going to it. So it's kind of like that. It's almost as if we get the late October thing happen again this time of year. In fact, Chris Brackett, which is an interesting character in the hunting world, right? But I like him overall. He's done some bad things, but so have I. He kind of has this like thing about the full moon in late October, and he's like, or late December. He's like, it is the time for killing a big buck. Which I thought was interesting. Yeah. And if nothing else, at least he's putting some hype out there to get people excited still, because a lot of people aren't, and you still should be if you.
He's using social contagion.
That's right.
I was thinking that just one last note on this thing. I got into a rut fest the other day.
You did?
In the bottoms, and this deer was actually, we don't have him on camera, and we've got 2 feeders running in that area. That blows my mind, dude. He has not cared about feeders. He's just rutting.
Yeah, and I think it's a thing you see. We saw it. It's funny. You don't see it in the plains as much. It's like they have to eat up there because they have to stay fat. But like, if you see the feeders dry up, all of a sudden, it's like it's a good thing. You need to be in the woods. Maybe not over the feeder, but
Yeah.
You need to be in the woods around the deer.
For sure.
Because they're doing the thing.
Guess I need to be in the woods, man. Because my
Might
feet
be time. Might be time. Yeah, well, let's actually see who we have got today around the country to give us more reports. Because we kind of know what's going on here in Texas, but what else is happening?
Well, this week we are hearing from Danny Espino, one of our buddies who we've known for a few years, who really gets after it on Texas public land, especially. Nic Schwartz, as opposed to Pants, he's going to be up in Oklahoma. Collin Marshall out in Maryland. And our good buddy Parker McDonald from the Southern Collective. He's out in Alabama giving us a report, and he's always on the deer. So I'm excited to hear from all these guys. Let's get to it.
I've got my friend and fellow Texas public land hunter, Danny Espino, on the line. Danny, what's been going on?
Hey, KC. Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're welcome,
Hey, man.
man.
I've just been hunting hard, here in North Texas public land.
Yeah, I see that on Instagram a lot. You're pretty good follow because you're always finding something cool or whatever, and
Yeah.
appreciate how hard you get after it, man. And I know it's been a long season, but it sounds like you're still after them. What are the deer doing in the woods in North Texas?
So I feel like they've kind of where we're at in North Texas, we kind of have that November mid-rut. So I was seeing deer just running hard. But I think they've gone back to normal right now, but they're pretty active on scrapes right now. That's what I feel. It's a good time to find a buck just coming back to a scrape.
Mm-hmm. Are you running cameras, and that's how you're kind of getting that information?
I've been running a couple cameras, but I have a couple of my buddies that also run cameras. So we all share intel with each other.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. That's been kind of a common theme on some of these interviews so far, that scrapes are kind of like the one thing that's hanging in there as far as, at least it's a common theme in the rut category. So, is that, to me, that means maybe that deer are still open to the idea, right? So I guess that an immature doe maybe could suddenly come into heat and change the ball game in your area. Have you seen any rut in action on camera or heard any of that going on at all, just randomly here and there?
I actually heard about it about 2 weeks ago, about a buck not running hard, but just kind of, interested in the doe.
Mm-hmm.
And just like you mentioned, it could just take that one hot doe coming kind of late into heat to get a buck just chasing after her.
Yeah. So how would you capitalize this time of year on maybe that situation or any other situation you feel confident, when you go into the woods hunting that spot?
I definitely capitalize looking for a fresh scrape line, maybe not one isolated scrape, but maybe a couple scrapes,
Mm-hmm.
in a direction, and then put a compounding feature upon that, maybe some doe bedding or a food source that is pretty consistent for this time of year. Mm-hmm. And just put some features that compound together on top of that scrape. And I think you can capitalize on a good buck.
Dude, you're speaking our language to this compounding feature stuff. You know what's up.
Are you seeing anything hitting acorns still?
So where I'm at, and obviously I don't want to give too much info out, but where I'm at, we don't really see a good acorn production where I'm at. Mm-hmm. So they're kind of hitting forbs and just whatever resource they can really find.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, gotcha. So you're fixing to go out and target deer pretty hard there here at the end of the season.
Yep.
Do you feel like pressure has eased up in the woods and you're able to go into places maybe that the deer were pressured out of and still see deer, or are you still having to just find nooks and crannies?
You're definitely having to find nooks and crannies, because I just think the pressure during the rut was so hard that the bucks just pushed everything out. I mean, I've been at one public land. It's been hit so hard that I can't even. Every time I go out, I'm not seeing any does, which is really weird. So it's been hit so hard that you really have to get into the nitty gritty, and you have to know where they're going to cross or where they're going to be at to really find a good buck.
Does that mean it's pretty much always going to be a pretty far hike in, or are there actually still overlooked spots?
Oh, they're definitely overlooked spots.
Mm-hmm.
It just depends on where you're at. You just really have to know the property.
Sure.
Are you still spending time in the mornings right now, or are you kind of focusing evenings only?
I would say I'm strictly a morning guy, morning to midday.
Mm-hmm.
I really don't like evenings. So if I'm not working, I'm hitting the woods early in the morning.
Yeah.
Or if I'm working, I'm getting right off midday and going straight to the woods.
Okay, so we don't have a lot of time, but I want you to expand on the midday thought a little bit, because I think that's really interesting and probably appealing to a lot of people, because if they were just like, you know what, I could get a hunt in from, 11 till 3 or something, they would.
Of course. Just briefly on that midday thought, you can definitely, when some people leave the woods in the morning and you're coming in midday, those deer are going to know something's up. And you can find a buck just slipping by thinking that everybody's gone, and you come in and you kill that buck.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a good thought, man. Well, if you're thinking about it based off weather or even full moon or whatever else is going on, in the next week, what would you rank buck movement in your opinion on a scale of 1 to 10? What do you think it's going to be?
I'd probably say about a 7.
7. That's pretty high, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exciting, dude. Well, if it's a 7, then you ought to be killing this week, right?
Hopefully, that's the plan.
That's good, man. Well, hey, I appreciate all the good information. Stay after it, dude. I know you work real hard at it, and it's cool to see it pay off. Thanks, Danny.
Thanks, Casey. Thanks, Tyler.
Nic Schwartz here has been hunting in Oklahoma some on some public ground, chasing the deer around. Dude, what's going on right now?
What's up, fellas? Oh, I'm just hanging out, pouring over on X, figuring out where I'm going to spend the next few days in the woods.
That's good, man. So we're going to get the Oklahoma report from you, but I'm always interested in people's strategy on this. Do you have a bunch of stuff kind of pre-marked that you think you might want to go check out, or are you kind of starting fresh on that?
Yeah, so this time of year, maybe around mid-December or so, I treat it as a new season. So I keep in the back of my mind where I've been, what I've seen, but things have definitely changed. So, coming out of the rut, good thing about the South is we, have a lengthier rut. So there's always a chance you're around a hot doe. But this time of year, I'm taking advantage of the time to check out some new spots. Some spots that I have interest in, and also revisiting some old spots and seeing what's going on there. So
yeah, that's cool. So you've been hunting Oklahoma some. What have you been targeting, really? Is it food sources, or are you still trying to find rutting deer?
It's really hard to target rutting deer right now. It's a little bit of a wild card. So pretty much been hunting food sources, which this year has been difficult. The areas I've been hunting are it's been a pretty good acorn year. So they're spread out. There's a lot of clear cuts. So wherever the winter wheat's coming up, they're coming out on that. So that's something I've been targeting as well. All the leaves are off the trees. So really focusing on the thickest cover. So down lower elevation creek beds where all that brushy, thick stuff grows up. I've revisited a few spots from early season that were really active, and a lot of them are fairly open, and they've kind of dried up since then. So I think the deer are feeling the pressure from all the rut action. And then with those leaves off the trees, I think they just feel more exposed. So they tend to head into, thicker cover.
Are they feeding in that thicker cover, or are they just mostly bedding there, do you feel like?
Both. I think they're feeding pretty close to bed. And the bucks are still doing some rut type, behavior. Mostly at night, they are making scrapes, and I've had some daylight action on scrapes as well. So it's the late season for me. It's a little bit of a hybrid of rut hunting and then early season too.
Is that scrape action in the morning or evening, or is it just random?
That's the tough part. Is it's been pretty random. I've had this year's been kind of cool because I've had cameras set up in areas that I know get pressure, and I also have cameras that are set up in areas that aren't pressured. So I've been able to compare, how deer are reacting to that, and in those areas where I know hunters have been in and out of quite a bit, myself included. those bucks are pretty much tending those scrapes at night. But the areas that are not getting pressured, I mean, y'all probably know the weather last week was pretty abysmal. It was almost 70 degrees in the afternoon, and I had, I don't know, maybe a 130, 140 class buck out at 1 p.m. checking a scrape.
They just do weird stuff sometimes, man. Gosh.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it's tough, but this time of year, if you can find a scrape that's been hit recently and the wind's right, to set up and sit all day, because you just don't know when they're going to show up.
So that sounds pretty terrible unless you have like 7 sandwiches in your pack. But I was kind of wondering your strategy on these late season setups. Are you bouncing like every day to something new, or do you kind of have I'm going to sit this spot because I know it's good, and within 5 days a deer's going to come by?
I think that depends on access. How easily I can get in and out of a spot. So if I feel like I'm not blowing it up real bad, then I'll give it multiple sits. But it's also kind of the time of year where I can swing for the fences and try and get into those areas that it's kind of a one and done. Because I know if I get in there, I'm going to be making noise. Now I might bring a buck in who's feeling territorial. But if it doesn't work out, then that may be it for a few days. So I might move on to another area. So having quite a few spots earmarked to know that, okay, once I do a sit here, then if I feel like I put pressure on that area, then I'll hop to another spot and let that spot rest. So that's where all the early season, preseason, and midseason scouting really comes in handy if you have a lot of spots that you can hop back and forth between.
Sure. So, looking forward into the next week, people get real weird and kind of in their feels this time of year because it's the end of the year and they got to, set their New Year's resolutions and all this stuff, right? We don't need any fluff here. What, on a scale of 1 to 10, would you rank buck movement in the next week?
If you had asked me last week, I would have given you a 2 or 3. But we had that nice cold front come through on Christmas Day. And based on what I've been seeing, I mean, my cameras are buzzing right now with deer moving on them. So
spooky.
Yeah, I'd give it a 6.
All right, man. Dude, I'll take a 6 last week in December for sure.
Yeah.
It's a good time to be in the woods because, like y'all, mentioned it, people are either tagged out or burnt out. So on public land, a lot of times it's a ghost town in late December, and in Oklahoma with an archery tag, I can hunt till January 15th. So that's what I'm planning on doing.
All right, man. Get after him. Appreciate the report, dude. Hope you kill a giant.
All right, guys. Well, have a happy new year and enjoy some time off with your family if you get it.
Now I've got Collin Marshall. He's been deer hunting in Maryland over the Christmas holiday and doing all kinds of crazy stuff. What's up, man?
The Element Boys, Tyler Jones, Casey Smith, what's going on?
Hey, dude, just kind of in full recovery mode, trying to digest a bunch of food because my family likes to force feed us. That's kind of what happens this time of year. But we're always thinking about deer hunting, man. How are the woods in Maryland?
Oh, man. Well, I still have tags to fill, so in my opinion, they are still wild and wonderful, just like the great state of West Virginia, except we're hunting in Maryland. It ain't the rut. They are running around for sure, but we are not getting a lot of daylight activity. A lot of, pre-sunrise stuff from that, 5:30 to 7, and then they're back to bed from there. And then we caught them in a good group coming up right before sunset. And they peek out of that wood line, and then they work that timber into the ag fields from there. But once shooting light is over, they kind of have come into bow range at that point. So we're really working some strategies of pushing maybe off of the edge of those ag fields and really try to work more of those transition zones inside of the timber.
Gotcha. What kind of agriculture are they hitting right now?
Right now on these fields, actually, the farmer's trying to replenish the nitrogen in the soil between the monocropping that they do. But we've got turnips and some winter wheat that's in there. So depending on what the temperature is doing and in terms of precipitation, sometimes they're really just hitting what's inside the woods. But we can really get them munching on the edges of the fields too, just depending on the precipitation and those temperatures.
When you say transition zones, what do you mean by that?
Going from bed to feed.
So what does it look like though?
In terms of those transition zones?
Yeah, like is that, I mean, because a transition zone could be, tall grass or tall timber or medium timber or short timber, or, what is it?
I'm talking about, tall timber. I'm talking wooded sections.
Gotcha.
So we hunt about 120 acres in north central Maryland, and it's about 90% ag field. 2 big fields. There's a real nice draw strip down the middle of it. But it's surrounded by woods, and so they're mainly bedding down inside of the tall timber woods, and then moving through those zones depending on what the wind's doing, and then out to those ag fields if that's really where they're drawn towards that food section.
Gotcha. So this time of year, cold fronts help a ton in my experience. Now, where you're at in the country is on a much different weather pattern than where we live and operate a lot. So right now we're just in a great cold front where we are. Is that how it is in Maryland, or are you still waiting on some of that cold weather?
We just crept out of a cold front actually, probably about 7 to 10 days ago. And I went out and sat, and the action was pretty hot. It was odd though. There was 1 or 2 bucks on the property that were chasing maybe one of those fawns that have come into that late heat. But other than that, the bucks have grouped up again. Mm-hmm. And I'm kind of waiting for a split out, but I just kind of holding out to watch that pattern to see what they kind of do. In terms of the cold front, though, I've got one coming in the first week of January, and that's when I really look to get back out there and watch the wind and see which stands are going to be the best to sit in. But the cold fronts in general are what really interests me.
Gotcha.
In terms of sitting in the woods. The cold doesn't bother me, man.
So you mentioned you can stay plenty warm, huh? That's good.
Yeah.
You mentioned the nighttime being a thing and having nocturnal movement. Do you think that since we have the full moon right now, as that kind of starts to wane, in the next week or two, is that going to help you with that?
I think that you're right on the waning side of it. I think that full moon, just being a wild and primal animal, they're definitely paying attention to it. But I like to hunt the front side of those, and then right as it's waning out, not like dead on in the full like it is today. And that next week when that cold front swings through again, and it's barely out of the 30s during the day, and it's in the 20s at night. And that moon is waning. That's going to be a real interesting time to start putting down some strategy inside the woods.
So on a scale of 1 to 10 in the next week, what do you predict buck movement to be like?
Like when I'm sitting in the stand, or are you talking about when I'm watching them on camera at night?
Well, let's just talk about overall 24-hour period buck movement.
I think it's pretty good. On a 1 to 10, shoot, man, y'all always want the 8s. But I'm gonna get a 7.25.
I actually would appreciate more 2s and 3s, to be honest.
Everybody's always so optimistic,
Well, it's fun. We're seeing them. I mean, that's the thing. Like, I don't want to just play to what everybody wants to hear. But is it keeping me up at night thinking about how much they're moving? No. Is it keeping me up at night about how much they're not moving? No, it's not. So it's let's put it somewhere in the middle there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But I think it is on the on the higher side of a 5. So I'm going to give it a 7.
Cool, dude. All right, man. We really appreciate the report from Maryland, and I hope y'all have a great rest of your Christmas holiday.
Thank you. Happy holidays to you guys.
All right, on the phone, I've got Parker McDonald. He's a good buddy of mine from Alabama. He's going to give us a report there. What's been going on, dude?
Oh, dude, just man, it was a very short but very, very productive season for me in Alabama this year. And, I was out a lot, like you guys, like traveling a lot during that November rut. Our ruts in Alabama are pretty much all going to be later. And so I was out traveling and doing that kind of stuff, and then came back, and it was just like it was on fire this year. So it's been great in Alabama this season.
See, dude, I can't really trust that it was on fire because you're just a good hunter. So, like, I mean, for the average guy, like me, it might not be on fire if I was out there. But
whatever.
You got,
that's some bullcrap.
You know what's going on, dude.
It really here's the deal, man. I've been telling a lot of people about this. Like, yeah, I try to be like studied up, and I try to make educated decisions every time I walk in the woods of what I think deer are going to do. But seriously, this year I have seen more people, just like people who might be considered like your weekend kind of guys, your weekend warriors. Like consistently, they go on maybe Saturday and Sunday. If they got a good couple days in there in the woods, they've been coming out with deer. It's crazy, dude. It's like, I don't remember last year if we talked much as far as the Rut Fresh stuff goes, but last year was really weak rut. Like it was just not very good. And it seems like maybe, and I'm not a biologist, this is just my best guess. It seems like a lot of bucks lived last year. Like just very few people killed them around here, around where I hunt at home in Alabama. It was just like if you killed anything decent last year, like you did something pretty special because just not very many people were doing it. But it does seem like a lot of those 3.5-year-olds made it to 4.5. And so you're just seeing guys killing 4.5 type-year-old deer.
Yeah.
It's just been, it's been unreal. It's been a good season.
Well, that's exciting.
I trust you more than maybe some of the other people you're talking about anyway. So I think you're right spot on the money. I haven't thought about it much, but I definitely can see that being a plausible thing, So do you think that since potentially there was older deer on the landscape that those deer were a little easier to kill? Or do you think that 4-year-olds are still 4-year-olds and you still have to do the same stuff for them?
Oh man, I think yes and yes. I think what you end up happening, like you guys are from Texas, so y'all know this deal. Like just because a deer is mature does not always mean that they're just going to be that recluse. You know what I mean? Like you go a deer without much pressure, you're going to see a deer's true personality, maybe, if that's what you want to call it. And so I think I can't even remember it was somebody a lot smarter than me was talking about this like idea that, yeah, sure, most of the big public land deer that we hunt, the big mature deer are going to be, kind of reclusive and like back in their own little space, not really surrounded by the general population of deer. But that's just because they live on public land, right? Like that's the ones that survive. The 3.5-year-old social deer, he got shot when he was 3.5 because he was out in the green field. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And so I think those.
They're great. They're awesome. But I think what happened last year is the rut was so lame, the does just didn't really go into estrus, it didn't seem like. I saw a lot of lone does, a lot of doe groups and does with fawns deer in the rut last year, and it just seems like, there just wasn't anything to get these deer up on their feet in the daylight. Like it was just kind of like, good luck, you know? And so a lot of these deer, I shot a 5.5-year-old buck, my last buck in Alabama last week. 5.5 years old, came out acting like he was 3.5 or 2.5, he was just, I'm not going to say easier to kill, but he was kind of easier to kill.
Yeah. Well, they do, and there's so many variables in what causes them to act a certain way for a certain number of hours, and whether that happens at night or day and all this and that too. So you just like sometimes that 5.5-year-old just gets to that point where he just is crazy for a second, which is exciting. So, with that being said, I mean, what, in a nutshell, what has been working tactically speaking for you?
Oh, dude. Calling has been pretty efficient this year, like grunting specifically. Man, it just seemed like this year coming in, my first hunt in Alabama was November the 27th, I believe. And I think I filled my last tag on the 12th, and we get 3 buck tags on the 12th of December. So in that time frame, is when I killed all 3 of my bucks, and nearly all 3 of them came into grunts, or were like the last one, that 5.5-year-old that I heard, he was roaring. I've never heard an Alabama buck do a buck roar. and he did.
Wow.
He sure enough did.
That's cool.
And ended up like that calling, like just really subtle grunts, you know, nothing too crazy, with a little bit of noise, maybe scrape some trees. Man, it just seems like it worked this year.
Yeah.
It worked several years, but it worked really well this year.
Are you doing that blind, or are you seeing bucks and doing that to them?
Both.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of the times, just depending on the time of day that it is, around that like 9 o'clock, 9:30 thermal shift, if you want to call it that, when the thermals start, you know, changing directions and moving up.
Yeah.
It just seems like that's when those bucks start getting real frisky and they start getting on their feet. And so that's when I start doing it.
Sure.
And it's usually like 3 or 4 just little tending grunts with some scrape some tree limbs, you know, that might be hanging up around me. And that downwind side of that, like if you can be in one of those type of situations where you can see the downwind side, man, it's
pretty money, huh?
It's worked.
Yeah,
especially if you got a rifle in your hand too.
Yeah, I can tell you that for sure. So, you know, in the next week, I know there's a lot of different rut regions there in Alabama. Maybe where you've been hunting, or maybe you could tell us like a region that would be like probably fixing to pop off in the next week or so in the rut.
Yeah, I mean, here's the deal. Alabama, I may have talked about this on this podcast before, but Alabama kind of looks like a weather map, like a hurricane system or storm system map, heat map for the rut. When you look up our rut map, that's what it looks like. And so literally in every region of Alabama, you're going to have ruts coming up in January. I would say January is by far when the most rutting activity happens in Alabama. But I mean, you can be in North Alabama, like literally on the Tennessee line. There's places up there that are going to be rutting up into February.
Wow.
Northwest Alabama, it's going to be popping off right here, like right now. And so, you know, it's not like the Midwest where you can just give like a general, like, the bucks were moving last week. Yeah. Because 30 minutes away, there is a doe in heat right now.
For sure.
That's getting just dogged by a bunch of bucks.
Yeah.
So I think for a southern hunter or for a guy that wants to extend his season and come south, like just a little tiny bit of research can really get you in the right direction, headed in the right direction. Because if you go to the wrong spot and you ain't finding a rut sign, move 30 minutes north, 30 minutes south. You know, you might find it.
Inspiring stuff, dude. All right. Just pop off right here. On a scale of 1 to 10, you're going to rank buck movement for the next week in Alabama. What you say?
I'm going to say it's going to be a 10 somewhere next week.
I think that's the first one.
That's our first 10 of the year, Parker.
Way to go,
Way to go, dude. This is the last interview for Rut Fresh of the year, and you just gave it a 10. Gosh, what a way to end it.
Listen, I love my state, man.
That's right,
I don't blame you, man.
Way to go. So
we
loyal.
appreciate it, dude. Thanks so much, Parker.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys.
Well, y'all, that wraps a year of Rut Fresh. It's been a lot of fun. Got to talk to a lot of new people. Got to talk to a lot of old friends. Most of all, I hope that Rut Fresh helped you be successful this year, or at least learn something, because honestly, doing these Rut Fresh interviews helps me. I feel like I have a better concept of like how deer hunting is done in the U.S., and it's pretty fun. If you're still out grinding, still getting it, we appreciate you, man, because dadgum if it isn't fun to just chase deer as much as you possibly can.
Yep.
We appreciate you listening as well. And if you do need a little inspiration or you need a little bit of, something to ponder, Dylan Tramp has an article about how to use hunting pressure to your advantage in the late season. And it sounds like that's one of the things that was a common theme this week. So if that resonated with you, go check out that article. We'll link to it below.
Big thanks to Mr. World Famous Mark Kenyon for letting us host this thing this fall. It's been fun. We appreciate Mark, his friendship, and just the overall kind guy he is to us, and also just a wealth of knowledge when it comes to whitetail hunting, and especially talking about photo period and those kind of things, right? Mark, thank you. Also, there are 2 things I want you guys to do before we get out of here. The first, make sure you subscribe to the Meat Eater channel and our YouTube channel. So on YouTube, you can subscribe to both YouTube channels. One is called The Element, one's Meat Eater, because we're going to be releasing new videos on those platforms periodically, pretty often, from here until indefinite. And then the last thing I want you guys to do is to go and subscribe right now to our podcast, the Element Podcast. I appreciate it, and you'll be hearing more from us when you do that. We come out with a weekly podcast, so this doesn't have to end. Appreciate all the listeners, and remember, this is Rut Fresh. Keep it fresh.
Fresh, 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 fresh.